If you're struggling to figure out what size to do your interior or how to calculate the dimensions, then hopefully this video will be helpful. So first, just Google like KDP set bleed or trim size margins, and this is the source that should pop up first. I'll also have a link to this in the description below in case you'd rather just click on that instead. So this entire page is super beneficial for deciding what kind of measurements you need for your interior. I'll kind of walk you through the basics, but I'm not going to read through every single thing. So, a few key terms before you start, as it's written here. Trim size is your printed book's width and height. The most common trim size for books is 6x9. Your bleed is going to be when it refers to printed objects on a page, such as images, background color, or graphics, that are past where it'll be trimmed. So kind of past that set margin where normally it stops, it will actually print outside of that margin. Margins, every page has 3 outside margins, top, bottom, and side. One inside margin is called the gutter, and margins ensure that nothing gets cut off during manufacturing. But if you have an image, for example, you want to be printed outside of the margin, this is when you would select bleed. So there's actually a video on it here that's on YouTube that KDP kind of goes over, and I highly recommend watching it if you're really confused about the sizes, margins, and bleed. I think that will definitely be beneficial. For trim size, you don't really have to go too much into this if you're doing a bleed book, but I'll kind of go over it briefly. So this is basically just what size your book is. Like, I'm not going to deep dive into it, but it goes over your trim size and then the number of pages you can have, which is kind of really cool that it goes over this. And I'm really happy that it gives the option for it. So moving down here, if we go to hardcover, then it just gives you the hardcover as well. So I recommend checking that out if you're trying to figure out what kind of color, or if you want to do black and white, or what size, just any information you're trying to get, I would recommend going through this whole page. And then bleed, this is where I would spend a good amount of time in case you're very new to this. I remember watching the videos and reading this over when I first started. So it gives a great example of bleed on the left and bleed on the right, and this is during file setup. So on the left here, there's no bleed. See how the image is within the lines, and then on the right, there is bleed. So see how the image is extended past the margin line, and it goes all the way to the end of the page. So then this is after trim. So there's no margins here because those don't actually get printed with your book. But on the left side, there is a nice white space all the way around and clear, and everything's lined up kind of in the middle. On the right side, there is not a clear white space around the edge. Instead, the picture is going all the way to the edges. So that's definitely something to note. And you can also check out, like, on the left side where her hair is. Her hair is kind of touching the edge right here, and over here it's actually a little bit over more, so you see a little bit more of the picture, which is good. When you do bleed, you do have to add more to the margins or to the sides of it. So let me just read this. It'll probably make more sense. All pages are trimmed to be selected to the selected trim size by cutting 0.125 inches from the top, bottom, and outside edges. So if you are creating a 8.5 by 11 interior and that's what you put in as your sizes, 0.125 will be cut from that, and that's what the margin will be here. This white space is cut. So if you don't want it to be cut, then you have to add 1.25 inches. So that way when it's printed, it won't be cut and you'll have the picture on the outside, like on this one here. So it kind of adds like a little line here to give you an idea. I believe that's like what the purpose of it is, but I could be wrong. So I'm not going to keep going into that. But you just want to add a little bit more on the outside. So in this chart, they actually give you the dimensions, which I think is amazing. So you don't really have to worry about it. Try to figure out what gutter means and everything like that. Just look at the size you want. So if we want 8.5 by 11 and we want bleed, it'd be 8.625 by 11.25 would be your interior. And you would just do this for any size book that you have. Now this is for the .com. So this one here, I believe, is Japan. Looks like there's different sizes, so in case you're publishing there, then you can check that out. And then it kind of goes over when to choose bleed for your interior. I recommend when you have like images that you want to extend all the way, scrapbook paper or craft paper pad niches especially are ones that I always do bleed. If you have a coloring book maybe and you want the coloring pages to kind of go all the way to the edge, something like that. There's so many different times when you would want it, like a children's book or a high content book. You may want it as well, depending if it's like a picture book. I would definitely recommend it for picture books, things like that. And then it kind of goes over margins, and it says the inside margin is sometimes called the gutter, and it just goes over all of this information. But if this is overwhelming, then I recommend picking what size book you want. So I'll do 6x9, scrolling down to this bleed, going to 6x9, and looking over here. So 6.125 inches by 9.25 inches. That's pretty much all that you really have to do. And I would focus on that for now. Once you get more advanced and you're starting to learn more, then I would consider going over the rest of the page. But if you're overwhelmed at first, then start with that. See how it goes. It most likely will work out for your book. And I really hope that this was helpful. I'll again have this in the description below. I'll have a link to it in case you want to check it out for yourself and you have any questions. Please feel free to ask them below. So thank you so much for watching and listening.